Hello, everyone. How are you feeling? Oh, we can do better than that. How's everybody doing? My name is Micaiah Thurman, and I will be your MC for this evening. And if you're wondering, Micaiah, okay, that's a weird name, but I've heard it before. That is because prior to what I do now, I anchored WREL Morning News for 7 years, waking up every single morning, get this, at 2:10 a.m. Yeah. So when people say, why'd you leave news? That's usually my answer, because it started at 4:30 a.m. And for the last 2 years, I've been so fortunate to launch a PR agency and run that. And it's been incredible to remain a part of this community, specifically with Wake County educators. And I'm honored to be with you tonight. Now, a few housekeeping items. You heard our announcement just a second ago to please put your phone on silent, but this is really important. We will be conducting videography during this show, and it will be posted online for thousands of people to see it. So that's reason one. Reason number two is our speakers have worked really hard to memorize their speeches, and we don't want to distract them. So if you can, just double check for me right now. Everybody look down and make sure, because if it does ring, I'll come back out and we'll all have to turn on the lights and see who did it. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But I am thrilled specifically this evening to be with you because I've spoken and talked a lot about the impact of educators on my own life, the impact of education on my own life. What's interesting is that while I did talk for a living and still talk for a living and do so much around literature, I am a granddaughter of a sharecropper who was a father of 9. My dad was the youngest, but for the entirety of his life, never learned to read or write. He had a 3rd grade education, but he did instill the importance of education and the importance of teaching to his children and to me. So when I left WREL, I also sought to be an educator. And so during the summer, in addition to the PR agency, I've been fortunate to be able to lecture at NC State. Now, I do want to take a pause. Can everyone who is an educator just take a moment and stand up? I just want to recognize you, no matter what grade level, no matter what age, you all are changing the game for all of us. Incredible. Thank you for what you do, and you all are all in for a special treat this evening. Tonight, we have assembled educators that I would say are reimagining and re-envisioning the way we see education. They are some of the brightest minds across the entire county. The goal tonight is for us to all hear their thought-provoking ideas that are challenging us to see education as a catalyst for change. So I want everyone to just take a moment and think, what do we see? What do we smell when we think about the word education, or maybe even school? Maybe you're seeing a locker or a cafeteria, or maybe those pepperoni pizzas that are in the shape of a square. But we know that education is so much more than that. And that's what today is about. We are going to be talking about ways that we can push the boundaries of conventional thinking and hopefully breaking free from those traditional molds that we've gotten accustomed to and dream beyond the limitations that we may have inadvertently set. It's about envisioning a space where education transcends borders and allows everyone to unlock their full potential. Now, I will say I got a little preview of these speeches, and I want to say that these talks are going to make us laugh. Sometimes we will cry, but the goal is for us to think. So here's who we have on tap. Jason King is going to encourage us to reimagine the essence of what it really is to be present. Leonardo Baquero will challenge us to reimagine ways in which we are thinking about mathematical thinking and the way that we can achieve even more. Betsy will then join us to help us confront our thinking as a community to reimagine ways in which we educate ourselves and the next generation of young adults of the enemies that may lie within our communities. And McEwen will help us remember those memorable moments that we have and reimagine how we capitalize those moments toward betterment. But our first speaker tonight, I am so proud to introduce, is Bettina Pope, who will challenge us. Yes, give her a hand. She's going to challenge us to reimagine the 3 R's of academics, elevating what really matters and what truly impacts our thinking to foster strong growth and even stronger self-potential. As a native of Northampton County, Bettina has spent the last 29 years in many roles within schools, including as a classroom teacher, a private tutor, a school counselor, and a college instructor. When she's not working with students, she's spending time with her friends and family traveling, engaging in a music ministry within her church, St. Paul A&M Church of Raleigh. She also supports her sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and her talk, titled Returning to the 3 R's, is going to inspire us to leverage the 3 R's to help students reach their full potential. Please give a warm welcome to Bettina Pope.
Do you ever hear words of wisdom echoing through your mind? You know, the voice of your grandparents or teachers that say that one phrase over and over that's now stuck forever in your memory. These sage words have a way of seeping through our subconscious, guiding our life decisions and helping us through difficult times. Now, I want each of you to take a moment and think of the best piece of advice you've ever received. Think of those words that you pull from when times are hard and you need a little encouragement or a pick-me-up. Let me give you an example. I was a 17-year-old high school senior from Northampton County. After being accepted to several colleges, I made the decision to attend North Carolina State University. Now, as you can imagine, I was very excited. Yet, moving away from all I'd known and commencing on this new adventure, I was equally nervous. My high school only had 750 kids, and soon I'd be placing myself on a campus with over 25,000 students. One afternoon during my final semester of high school, I went to my classmate Tammy's house to work on a project for English class. Now, I assure you we were working, but as with teenage girls, we were also talking. I was going on and on about my anxiety of a new school, new people, harder classes, and so many students. Tammy's mother was in the room adjacent to where we were. Overhearing my angst, Mrs. Woodard stepped into the doorway and said very casually, "You may not be the cream at the top, but at least you're in the churn. You may not be the cream at the top, but at least you're in the churn." Now, Mrs. Woodard probably never knew the impact those words had on me, but I have carried them with me from that moment. They helped me through undergrad when I felt inadequate and underprepared. And I continue to hear those words whenever imposter syndrome creeps in. Her advice helps to remind me that though I may not always be the best, I am enough. Now, the process of learning from the past to build the future is rooted in the West African concept of Sankofa. Taken from the Akan tribe of Ghana, loosely translated, it means go back and get it. Now, as humans, we have a propensity to invent and explore. We are ingenious beings, creative and curious. Just think, in the past 20 years, we have introduced computers and online learning, transitioned to platforms such as Canvas and Google Classroom as modes of delivery, and incorporated applications such as Kahoot and Desmos into our instruction. And though I am supportive of all these new innovations in education and learning, I believe in the great wisdom of pausing and turning to the direction from whence we came in order to remember, reset, and realign to what is important. The Akan tribe understood the importance of learning from the past to build the future. And I believe now is the time to do the same. We must go back and get it. Education is not just my passion. I believe it's my purpose, and I am not alone. There are thousands of educators in this district, state, and country, all with that same purpose: to teach, guide, and inspire. However, we cannot ignore the fact that there are some challenges, and walking in that purpose can be difficult at times. In the challenging world that is post-pandemic teaching, I believe it is necessary for educators to look to the past to positively impact and improve the future. Now, I go back 20 years to 2004 when Wake County Public Schools initiated the 3 R's: relevance, rigor, and relationships. They are my foundation and have served me and my students well all these years. I am what some would call a unicorn. This is my 29th year in education. 26 of them having been spent at the same school. I am not old per se. I like to think of myself as seasoned. I was born in the 70s, a child of the 80s, raised by the 90s, and blessed to experience the 2000s. Yet the students who sit before us now were born in the 2000s, shaped by a global pandemic, and were operating cell phones and tablets before they could form whole sentences. They are children of a technological age. Enter the first R, relevance. Now, when you're scrolling through your social media, you quickly pass by posts that you don't relate to. You have no point of reference. But the ones that you stop and interact with, they matter to you. You feel connected. They are relevant. Our students are no different. The world and all its knowledge is at their fingertips. From their point of view, why is learning what we're presenting important? That information is a simple Google search away. In English class, they ask, why do I have to read Shakespeare? In history, they ask, what does a battle that was fought in 1918 have to do with me? And in math, they ask, who actually uses the Pythagorean theorem? Okay, that one sorry. If students do not understand the why of what they are learning, then they simply won't. Though the answer to the question, what is the theme of Romeo and Juliet, can be found with a few keystrokes, a chatbot cannot teach the importance of truth or the consequences of conflict. AI cannot teach empathy. As educators, it is our job to not only help our students understand why learning is important, but that it is a lifelong endeavor. This is done by connecting the learning curriculum to their lives and communities, local and global, and by building bridges to real life. Now, once you get them to see that things are relevant, there is more buy-in, and students will work hard to reach the bar that you set before them, regardless of how high. Some will reach it, others won't. But oh my goodness, imagine the growth in the attempt. Now that you've gotten them to see relevance, rigor can step in and up. At a recent faculty meeting, I picked up this gem from a coworker. Rigor is defined by the student, not the teacher. We must meet students where they are. If there's too much rigor, then there is frustration, and if there's too little, there is boredom and complacency. We have to have students work hard. I will never forget attending a district professional development a few years ago. Some of my peers were shocked to discover that I had my lowest level students reading Tolstoy and Gita Maupassant. I was confused as to why. Greed, friendship, love, these concepts are universal, and my students understood them regardless of which world-renowned author presented them. Every student is capable of learning. We must embrace this fundamental belief. How do we get students to reach for that bar? Relationships. It is the core piece of the 3R puzzle. How do you know what is relevant to your students if you don't know them? How can you demand rigor if students don't trust you enough to know that that rigor is for their benefit and not punitive? As educators, our first steps are to discover who our students are and what gifts they have. Then we should work to support and illuminate those things. As Maya Angelou so eloquently put it, we should aim to be the rainbow in someone else's cloud. His name, Guillermo. He did not smile the first few weeks of class. He wanted me to know that he did not want to be there. Freshman year had not been kind to him, and he had developed a distrust of education and educators. Now that year, my PLT was practicing DEAR, drop everything and read. Guillermo was hesitant and reluctant, but our media specialist, Heather, discovered that he was drawn to nonfiction, particularly those pieces detailing the lives of hip-hop artists. She ordered every appropriate autobiography and biography she could find, and Guillermo checked them out as quickly as they arrived. His confidence grew, as well as his academic output in all his classes. That semester, Guillermo not only finished second in number of pages read, but he also passed all his courses, putting him back on track to graduate with his class. We saw him. We poured into him and his interests. And more importantly, we let him know that we believed in him and that if he was capable of success in that one class, that he was capable of success in every class. Now, I'm sure we all have these same success stories, but none of them would be possible if we did not take the time to develop relationships so that we could discover what is relevant and increase rigor. So no matter what you do, take the time to find your bedrock tools, those encouraging words, and use them to lift the people around you with intention and a desire to make a difference. Now, often when I find myself in need of a Sankofa moment and I must go back and get it, I seek the voice of my mother. And so I leave you tonight with one of her many wise sayings. Everybody knows their own people. So as you enter your classroom, know the people who sit before you. And remember, you are not teaching English or art or science. You are teaching children. Thank you.
Absolutely outstanding. Bettina, thank you so much. Guillermo's story and hearing about relationships and how pivotal they can be, lots of learnings from that. And we're going to continue on with our theme of Reimagine. You're in for a treat. We can't ignore, of course, the significance of creating also these memorable moments for students, which are core to sustaining relationships. So our next speaker, who started his professional career as a YMCA camp counselor, has used that experience to inform his practice as a 14-year educator at Wake County Public School System. He enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 daughters, loves to play sports, and is an active outdoorsman. His speech titled "Memorable Moments Matter" will demonstrate how to balance academic expectations while creating experiences that students will never forget. Please welcome Neil McEwen.
Tonight, I want to take you back to when you were a kid. I want you to think about a fun, memorable experience, maybe one that makes you feel nostalgic about being in school when you were young. For me, I was in 3rd grade. My teacher, Mrs. Borman, she was awesome. She popped us some popcorn. She rolled out one of those old school TV carts with like the cube TVs. And now one might think, hey, we're about to watch a science documentary, maybe a lesson in history, maybe even a good old classic Schoolhouse Rock, which would have been cool. Who doesn't love a Schoolhouse Rock? But we were there to watch something even better. We were there to watch the ACC tournament. Yes. That's right. I mean, if you grew up in the Triangle, you know what I'm talking about. Duke, UNC, NC State, it's the greatest basketball tournament of the year. And I was getting to watch it in the middle of a school day. I mean, I should be doing math, and I'm getting to watch basketball. So, this is not the 90s. I mean, this is the 90s. There's no curriculum connection or anything like that. Like, we're just watching basketball, having a good time, hoping UNC loses. So, 25 years later, and 10 years after being a teacher myself, I received a message from a former student. In it, she says, "I was in your 5th grade class at Fox Road. I want to thank you for being a great teacher. You left an impact on my life. I'm pregnant with my first baby girl and in school for nursing." And then she said these words. She said, "I'll never forget our Shibuya roll calls and your passion for watching Duke. I hope you still are that enthusiastic teacher." Now, I don't have time tonight to share about Shibuya roll calls. That's for another evening. But what I can say is I did continue Mrs. Borman's ACC tournament tradition in my own class. And yes, I am a Duke fan. And clearly, one of this student's fondest memories of her entire 5th grade year was a basketball game and seeing her teacher's passion for Duke. She clearly excelled in school, pursuing a college education, a degree in nursing, but what does she most remember? Not her EOG scores. She didn't say anything about her report card grades. No, she remembers a basketball game. What moment did you remember? You two probably remember something fun or celebratory or out of the ordinary, something where you were just happy to be in school. You see, I'm convinced these memorable moments, the ACC tournament type moments, I'm convinced these matter at least equally, if not more importantly, than the math, reading, and writing we're to teach our students. Let's reimagine what it could look like if we balance academics with this pursuit of creating fun, memorable experiences with our students. In doing so, I believe we'll help teachers fall back in love with teaching, remind them of why they started teaching in the first place, and we'll help students become more committed to being and staying in school and actually enjoying it. Unfortunately, the problem for a lot of teachers is we feel held hostage by a system that realistically doesn't always support and encourage this type of learning and growth outside of academics. Starting in 2011, there was a shift in the achievement focus for our students through the NC General Assembly's EPS Act. It was revised in 2013, requiring 80% achievement and 20% growth on a school level. So as teachers, we're required to have high-ranking standardized scores on our student test, have data that shows year-over-year growth, and adhere to a curriculum that follows a strict pacing guide with little room for flexibility. Now, none of those things are bad in themselves, and I'm okay with accountability. Certainly, we all benefit from some measure of accountability, but these requirements present a high level of stress and pressure for teachers and for students, which may account for the deficit of teachers in our system. I don't know if you've heard, but people aren't exactly knocking down the door right now to become teachers. And it makes sense because as teachers, we often feel the need to abandon our creative mindset and follow that set pacing guide. We feel the need to teach directly to a test instead of our individual students. And we do that because our reputation is certainly often tied to our students' achievement. If they do well on that test, I'm a great teacher, but if something happens for whatever reason and they don't do well, all of a sudden I'm not so good anymore. In turn, our students experience a scripted curriculum, monotonous day-to-day activities, sometimes forgettable learning experiences, and I would say most tragically, our students become numbers and not names with faces and personalities. What all this means is teachers are slowly losing a passion for teaching, and students are losing a chance to develop a love of just being in school. Now, I know all that sounds bad, but I promise you there's good news. And I believe that the good news lies in the power of memorable moments. If we can find a way to incorporate fun, memorable experiences for our students, we can interrupt the monotony of the day-to-day and we can inject life back into our classrooms. I've seen this year after year in my own class. Priorities are reimagined, stress slowly fades, pressure gets taken down a notch, and students feel more freedom to just be themselves. Now, I know many of you may be asking, but Neil, what about academic success? Because of course that does matter, and I would say that's also where good news lies. I believe memorable moments encourage academic success. In fact, when done well, I would say memorable moments enhance academic success. These are Partnership Elementary School's last 5 years of science EOG scores in 5th grade. 2019 represents the year before I got there. 2020 was COVID. 2021 was that weird, like half virtual, half in person. But as you can see over the last 2 years, which matches up with our prioritizing these types of memorable moments I'm talking about, you can see an increase in our scores. Now, I want to be clear, there's a lot of things at play when we talk about EOG scores. This is not the end-all, be-all. But I can confidently say that prioritizing these types of moments and memories at Partnership is not hurting us academically. You would think that stepping away from the pacing guide, which we do sometimes, You would think that taking away some of that precious instructional time that we hold so dearly and replacing it with just fun things, which we do sometimes, you would think that that would hurt us academically, but I've seen the opposite. And what I think is happening is that when your students see you outside of academics doing fun things with them, they see you in a different way. They start to see you as more than a teacher. They start to build this fun relationship with you, and most importantly, they start to trust you. And when you have your students' trust, incredible things can happen academically. The second note that I'd like to share tonight of good news about memorable moments is that they create laughter, and laughter generates belonging. And our kids need a sense of belonging now more than ever. In their book, The Power of Moments, Chip and Dan Heath tell us, laughter is more about relationships than the humor. We laugh to tie the group together. Our laughter says, I'm with you and I'm part of your group. I was having a recent conversation with one of my fifth graders, and she said, Mr. McEwen, like this year in fifth grade, all the fun stuff we've done has just reminded me that school doesn't have to be a place that you just learn. It can be a place where we can be a family. I mean, isn't that what every teacher wants? Isn't that what every parent wants to send their kid to? A classroom that feels like a family, where they belong in that way. We want our students to associate school as a safe place to be enjoyed. And I believe laughter through memorable moments goes a long way in making that happen. And when it does, incredible things can happen. The benefits are huge. The last note that I want to share tonight of good news about memorable moments is they provide opportunities to teach life skills outside of math, reading, and writing. We get so hyper-focused sometimes on academics that we forget to equip our kids with skills that are equally important for their future success. Harvard University came out with a study that said 85% of career success depends on having well-developed people skills and other skills such as communication, problem solving, and more. And we're stressed over an EOG score? We need to be finding ways to teach intentionally these other skills that are going to matter for them. Of course, future employees are going to want people that are skilled and knowledgeable, but if they don't know how to communicate, problem solve, get along with others, businesses and productivity will definitely suffer. Now, I know a lot of what I'm saying tonight revolves around being a teacher and is speaking to other educators, and I'm coming from a classroom perspective. And certainly I believe that memorable moments are worthy of all teachers' investments, but I believe that memorable moments are worthy of all of our investment. Maybe you run a nonprofit. Maybe you work in healthcare. Maybe you're a project manager. Maybe you run a business. Maybe you're just a parent with kids. Can you take the uninspiring moments, the uninspiring meetings, the uninspiring day-to-day, and create these fun, memorable, out-of-the-ordinary experiences? If so, I believe you might see higher workplace retention, higher employee satisfaction, more productivity, and most importantly, just more positive relationships built on trust and unity and joy. I'm going to end tonight with a quick story from my fifth grade classroom. So I decided to be proactive and create one of these moments in my own class. And so I dressed up as an astronaut, our school mascot. I got up onto this table, fifth grade. I got up onto this table and I was going to fall back into my fifth grader's arms. I was doing a trust fall. We had this long conversation about trust. It was going to be magical, incredible. I was going to put it on Instagram. It was going to be awesome. And then this happened. So I can guarantee you that there was a lot of laughter in the room. It was not coming from me. Herniated disc and all, looking back on that, I'm so happy that that happened. And the reason why is because inevitably, like in life, when you do these things, something's going to go wrong. Challenges are going to come up. Adversity is going to come. And it's in those moments where the beauty lies. It's in those types of moments where relationships are built and strengthened. It's in those types of moments where you have conversations about life skills. It's in those types of moments where laughter is had. You see, I didn't get into teaching because I love math or reading or science. I'm okay with them. But I got into teaching because I wanted a platform to show kids that you will only go as far as your character will take you. And it is in those real life moments where you get the best chance to do that. So I got back up on that table. I'm happy to say that I survived the second fall after a very serious discussion with them about what happened there. But I hope that they remember that. I hope that they take like a little piece of something from that moment. And then we'll do something else again in a couple weeks. And I hope they'll remember something from that. And then a month later, we do something else. And my hope is that they're starting to take these little moments and slowly piece them together and is starting to form the type of people that we want them to become. So I encourage you, whatever it may look like for you, step out of your ordinary day-to-day and find a way to do this. Maybe for you, it is getting on a table and doing a trust fall, if you're brave enough. Maybe for you, it's picking something totally random, like the World Cup in this picture, and you just decide, instead of doing something else that you should be doing, you watch it together in the middle of the day, just to experience the joy and power of community. Maybe for you, it's creating a fun scavenger hunt with all sorts of crazy tasks to practice problem solving, creative thinking, having fun together. Maybe for you, it is just creating an intentional moment of kindness to remind somebody that they are known and valued and loved. Heck, maybe it's just popping popcorn and watching March Madness together. Whatever it is, we never feel like we have time to slow down and do these things, but I promise you we can, and I promise you that it is worth it. Don't underestimate the power of memorable moments. A pretty famous author, this guy named Dr. Seuss, he once said, "You will never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory." Let's give the students in our classes and the people in our sphere of influence memorable moments that may impact them in ways we can't yet imagine. Thank you.
What an incredible story there. I was looking at one of the kids' faces. I don't know if you saw it, and he was just looking at Neil like, what have we done here? My takeaways that I'm just getting so far are just about the passion and purpose of being an educator, and it's really touching me. I will say that beyond these memorable moments that Neil was just talking about, we do know that sometimes our school communities can be impacted by outside forces that we have little to no control over. Our next speaker has felt that direct impact of these forces and since has actively worked to reimagine the way we solve the issue. As a 28-year educator, she has a passion for education and empowering the people around her to utilize their gifts and voice to create positive change. In her talk titled "The Enemy in Our Community," she will discuss the ways in which education can be a vehicle to address the enemies within our communities. Please welcome Betsy Moore.
If I were to ask parents here in this room, what is your fear when your children walk out the door? I think a lot of us would find we have a lot in common, and in some relief, find that we're not alone in our fear. And I have a strong feeling that many of you parents go out and you have these conversations with your children and you share your fears in productive ways. You inform them, you talk with them, and you encourage them to make good decisions and stay out of trouble. We have to do this. They're not easy conversations to have, but we're charged to do this as parents. I know when I was 18 years old, we had MAD and SAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Students Against Drunk Driving. My parents shared their fears with me about me drinking and driving or getting in the car with someone else who was drinking and driving. I followed in their parenting footsteps, and I had conversations with my son Wilson about my fear of him drinking and driving. But I shared other fears that I had too. If I saw a news clip about teens taking pills, we talked. If I read an article about teens speeding, we talked. If I heard about a teen losing their life to drugs, we talked. I talked with my son, and I prided myself in thinking I am a good parent because I'm having these conversations with him. But recently, I just lost my son, and I've realized that there's a much bigger enemy right here in our community, and it's much stronger than a mother-son talk. Right now, we have an invasion of opioids in our community. Now, for some of us, we might think, oh, this is kind of new on the scene, but actually, opioids have been around for over a century. They were first introduced during the Civil War as a pain relief to treat wounded soldiers. However, in the years to follow, those same soldiers began to develop dependencies and addictions to these opioids. If you think about opioids, a lot of times we put them into three categories. We have that prescription type of opioid when we think about Oxycontin and morphine, something we're kind of familiar with hearing about. Then we hear that word heroin, and most of the time our minds quickly go to that illegal substance that's a recreational drug, a derivative of the morphine. And then we hear that word fentanyl. Fentanyl has its place in our society. It's used to help trauma patients and cancer patients, but right now we have drug dealers who are using that to mask and unleash this enemy right here. If you look, you see that there are 3 waves of opioid overdoses that have occurred between 1999 and 2021. In 2013, we saw a huge spike in synthetic opioids. This includes fentanyl, and it's becoming one of our leading causes of death. So let's think, what is fentanyl anyway? Well, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It is FDA approved, but what is so different about fentanyl than other opioids is it is 100 times more potent. It's more potent than heroin, than morphine, than Oxycontin. In 2023, the overdose rate for fentanyl topped 112,000 according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now let's put that number into perspective. Think about the 9th, 10th largest city here in North Carolina, like High Point, being wiped out from a fentanyl overdose. That is the equivalent of the same size. The CDC states that fentanyl right now is the leading cause of death in people between the ages of 18 and 45. Look in front of you, look behind you, look beside you. The majority of the people right here in this auditorium this evening fit that age category. But here is what is the most nefarious thing about fentanyl right now. Not only is it odorless and tasteless, it's being used to lace products such as marijuana, gummies, even candy such as Skittles. We use this word overdose, and when we hear that word, mainly we think about something that's been taken too much of, whether intentionally or not. But we have this new word that we're having to introduce into our society, and it's poisoning. And that's when someone is taking something that they don't realize what it is. Right now, we have drug dealers who are substituting the ingredients in pills to make counterfeit pills to look just like prescription medicine. That's scary because it is identical to what you see. The USDEA says that nearly half of all counterfeit pills are laced with a lethal dose of fentanyl. So we ask ourselves, why would these drug dealers want to give their clients something that's going to kill them. It's all about the money. That's all they care about. Because you see, it only takes a small dosage of fentanyl to give the same high as other opioids. So fentanyl becomes the more lucrative drug to sell. These drug dealers are thinking about building that addiction so they can get that repeat clientele and those return customers to make that money. They're playing chemists, they're playing doctors, they're playing pharmacists. And it only takes 5 grains of fentanyl to be lethal. But the drug dealers don't care, because the bottom line to them, it's all about making money. And here is what happened to my son, Wilson. Like many of you parents in here, you probably have the same agreement with your children as teenagers. You know, wake me up when you get home so I know you're home okay. So, like any other ordinary evening, Wilson comes home at 12:30. He comes in my room and says, "Hey, Mom, I just want to let you know I'm home." He played with the dog there at the end of the bed, and we began to talk. He said, "Hey, you know, tomorrow I'm going to go over to Dad's. I got to help him grind up a stump." I began to tell him about my plans for the next day. He said, "Well, you know, I want to sleep in the morning, so I probably won't be able to see or talk to you until later on in the afternoon." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Well, night, I love you." And I said, "I love you too." However, sometime in that night of Saturday, February 17th, 2024, my son died. Now, although this is an ongoing investigation and nothing has been confirmed, we suspect that Wilson ingested a drug such as fentanyl that took his life immediately. I think it goes without saying, he didn't know. He had no idea what he took that night was going to end his life. He had another friend who also lost his life. 2 young men devastated a community. It caused us all to ask those questions. Why? How? If these 2 young men could lose their life in the same manner, who else is going to lose their life? Where would they get such a substance? And why would they take it? But before I share with you what I have learned and continuing to learn, I want to take the time to share with you about my son. Meet Horace Wilson Ward IV. He was also very fondly known as Stick, Scooter, Willie. No matter what you called him, he was this kind, full of energy kid, and he could light up any room. You knew when he walked in because you felt his presence. Wilson was born on Saturday, February 19th, 2005, which was actually his due date. His dad liked to laugh and say that's the first and last time that boy has ever been on time in his life. I like to call him Christmas, because just like Christmas you waited for all year, you'd wait and wait for him to get ready. But when he got ready, boy, he was a gift, and you were glad he was there. Wilson graduated Heritage High School last year, and he decided to work for a while before thinking about college. It was when he started working for this surveyor that I saw this light in him just ignite. He was excited. He was coming home and telling me about what all he learned and about his day's adventures. Wilson was finding his niche, and he was starting to find himself. But here are the most important things that you need to know about my son. If my son saw an injustice in the world, he was there to make it right. Wilson was full of energy and full of joy. He could find the good in any situation and anyone. He loved being outdoors. He loved exploring. He loved figuring out things and how things worked. Wilson was a fierce friend. If you were his friend and had that honor, he would fight for you and stand up for you no matter what. Wilson never met a stranger. He knew people far and wide, across county lines and beyond. Wilson was also a great role model to kids. They looked up to him. his little brother and sister couldn't wait for Wilson to come over to their house to see him. He had little cousins and neighbors that also would flock to him, and Wilson took the time to make them feel special. But as a mom, the most comforting thing that I have about my son that I hold so dear was his strong faith. And like many of us, his faith may have wavered from time to time, but in his most difficult times in life, he clung to that faith. Now, I am just one of a long line of survivors that has had to suffer through these tragic circumstances. But I want to tell you about some good things that are happening right here in our community and people who are trying to make a difference. We have two out Raleigh, out of Harnett County. This nonprofit is a family who also lost their son in a very similar way. Just last year, they passed out 40 cans of Narcan. They talked to the children and the teens about where you can find fentanyl, where it exists, and how to equip yourself and how to save lives. Barb Walsh, she is the founder of the nonprofit of Fentanyl Victims Network of North Carolina. She first founded this so people that were victims of this abuse and these deaths didn't feel alone, that they had a network to come to and to rally together. But she's taken it a step farther. Now she is looking at laws and ways that we can impact here in our community so this doesn't happen to anyone else. Right now, I am still grieving for my son while trying to celebrate his life. And I have to do this, and I have to do it for Wilson and honor him in this sacred way. It's not easy, and I don't know where I'm going to go with this and what this is going to look like. But I can tell you what I do know. I am going to fight this enemy in this community for Wilson. I do know that he touched so many lives, and he was loved by the multitudes. His life mattered, and this is going to be used to save not just one life, but his story will be to save thousands. Tonight is only the beginning. You will hear and you will see me again. Our theme for this evening is Reimagine. I want you to reimagine how we can prevent this from happening to another child, another neighbor, another friend, another colleague, anyone out there. I want you to reimagine how we can educate ourselves and teach one another so this does not happen, and that we can find ways to teach us to not take prescription drugs that don't belong to us, to look at these labels that we see, and to not experiment with drugs. We have to reimagine this because fentanyl's here, and those drug dealers are pushing it because they want money. But if you want to ask me what you can start doing right now this evening, I'm going to tell you, to all of you parents, to all of you friends, families, leaders, anyone out there, don't stop talking. Learn with each other and your children about fentanyl. Find out where it exists. Take politics out of this. Every one of us has to think of the solutions, and we all have to be on board. We all have to be together as we go through this journey. We have someone who had to reimagine their life and has made a huge impact. Jason DeFord. Most of us know Jason DeFord as Jelly Roll. His story is really unique because not only was he a drug user, he was a drug dealer. But just this past January, he went to speak in front of Congress to talk about anti-fentanyl legislation. He said, "I was once part of the problem. I stand before you now as a man to be part of the solution." Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to get our heads out of the sand. You cannot say, "Not me, not my child." You can't pretend that you are the untouchables. If you do, you become part of the problem. And we have to be part of the solution. On February 19th, 2005, my life was changed forever for the better. because I got the honor and the privilege to become Wilson Moore's mom. I chose to live my life for him then. I'm going to continue to live my life for him now. I choose to be part of the solution. Thank you.
That touched so many of us, and I think Betsy's message of this can happen to absolutely any of us. And hearing Wilson's story has already impacted my life. So Betsy says this is just the beginning, and I certainly believe it. And it is our pleasure and our blessing that she was able to share her story just 1 month later. So let's give her another round of applause. There was so much beauty in the way that Betsy is handling this, and we are moving to another topic where we are seeing beauty as well that can be found in mathematics. Through narratives and the power of storytelling, Leonardo Baquero will help us to reimagine the ways in which we engage in mathematical learning. As a 20-year educator, he's found authentic ways to engage students in a subject that many have found a lot of challenges. Leonardo enjoys traveling with his wife, 2 daughters, and if he's lucky, he says they let him pick which historical sites to visit. He also likes to run half marathons and is an avid listener of jazz music. Please welcome Leonardo Baquero.
By a show of hands, how many of you love taking math at school? I'm not a doctor, but I would venture to guess those of you who didn't raise your hands just now felt a little anxiety and discomfort. The topic of learning math for most people usually transports them back to a time of confusion, frustration, and perhaps even embarrassment. What I hear the most when I tell people about what I do is, "You teach math? Oh my God, I was terrible at math at school. You know, I never ended up using anything I learned at all since then." What surprises me the most about statements like these is typically they come from educated, professional people. I've never once heard anyone say, "English? Oh, I never learned to read at school." Or, "Yeah, maybe I read a couple of books once, but you know, I've never had to use my reading skills at all since then." Tonight, I invite you to my world of reimagining math for my students. And I invite you to examine your relationship with math as I walk you through a little how I've turned math upside down and inside out to make it more accessible, more applicable, and more beneficial for my students. My task was to reimagine, to show students that they can do math and to feel confident and capable of tackling math's challenges. And perhaps I can show you how the techniques I've used in my classroom to help my students overcome their fears of math might be applicable to other areas of your life as well. How will I know if I've succeeded? Like any good educator, there will be a test at the end of my talk. Don't worry, guys, it's an easy one. You're all going to do fine. Trust me, I'm a math teacher. For almost 20 years, I've been a math teacher, from public schools in the US to private language institutes in Peru. From New York to North Carolina, my license from both states reads that I'm certified to teach middle school to high school mathematics. But the course that I've taught the most is not AP Stats or Pre-Calc. Its official title is Introductory High School Mathematics. It's basically the lowest math level course you can take while still earning credit. And what kind of students take an entry-level course like this? Well, let's put it this way. Not the most enthusiastic of math learners. So, here I am, teaching a subject that most people don't want to learn to students who mostly don't want to be taught. And believe me, they let me know. Every day, with their sleepy eyes, their angry looks, their tired faces, I can tell there's much more going on in their lives than just their dislike of math. For instance, my student, always looking tired in the front row because He now is crammed into a hotel bedroom along with the rest of his family after they got thrown out of their apartment for being unable to pay the rent. Or another student who comes in late 15 minutes every day because she now lives with her aunt 2 towns over because her mother lost custody due to substance abuse. So, what do? I teach them math. Or rather, I should say I don't teach them math, but try and take the math out of math. Let me explain. The great German mathematician Carl Friedrich Gauss was given a problem when he was a young math student, a complex and tedious task. Here it is. Add up all the whole numbers from 1 to 100. Almost immediately, Gauss raised his hand with the correct answer, 5,050. So, how did he do it? Was he simply a brilliant mental mathematician? No. He reimagined the question. Instead of adding up the numbers in order, 1 plus 2 plus 3 and so on, he added the first and last numbers together. They totaled 101. The same is true for the remaining pairs of numbers. With 50 pairs of numbers, each totaling 101, what was once a complex and tedious math problem now becomes a relatively trivial one. 101 times 50 equals 5,050. A complex math problem reimagined. For far too long, math has been seen as this abstruse field of study, similar to Kafka's novel, The Castle, something all of us can view in plain sight, but seemingly impossible to either enter or attain. And that is not how it should be. I firmly believe that everyone can be successful in my math. This is what I do. I transfer a math problem into something positive and doable for any student by employing 3 approaches: play, personalize, and perception. First, let me introduce the concept of play. Take this assignment. Rewrite a fractional exponent so that the b term is the index of the radical and the a term is the exponent of the radicand. And I turn it into this. I tell a story. Every exponent is made up of a fraction that has a top dog and a bottom dog. And where does the top dog get to sleep? Inside the doghouse, of course. And the bottom dog, well, they don't get to sleep inside the doghouse. They have to sleep outside. So instead of rote memorization of an algorithm, students now get to decide which dogs get to sleep outside and which can sleep comfy and cozy inside the radical. Are we still meeting the requisite math standard? Yes. But by using this heuristic, students can joke and have fun and fully assimilate their knowledge into true learning. How do I know? Years later, students will often come up to me at graduation and tell me how they still remember the story about the dogs when they had to solve similar problems on their college placement exams. Math is now taking on the quality of play and fun. The benefit of using play typically results in long-term retention. My second approach is to personalize. One day, while I was teaching my class the concept of congruent triangles in geometry, I asked them, how can you tell when 2 triangles are congruent? My overly enthusiastic and always happy to volunteer ESL student raised her hand and called out, "Los palitos, los palitos," or translated from Spanish, the little sticks. Her calling out "los palitos" ignited laughter throughout the classroom. So, for the rest of the period and the rest of the semester, both English language learners and native-born speakers called the lines for triangle congruency palitos. Congruent triangles, math world language, was now gleefully replaced with personalized language. The students had ownership, a renewed ability to relate to this math concept. What was once foreign and off-putting was now something the whole class could agree on. And instead of being told what the math was, they claimed the freedom and agency to decide what math was to them. By using the element of play and making it personal, I witnessed engagement where before students would tune out. I notice a shift in their belief about doing hard work. Where before they would give up, now they persist. This is where the perception of doing anything hard, even challenging, is now seen as possible. This is my ultimate goal, to break the perceptions of my students to what they think is impossible to not only possible, but doable. In other words, reimagine. The educator Ignacio Nacho Strada writes, "If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn." My students taught me to be a better teacher. They showed me to perceive math through story, metaphor, renaming, imagination, qualities I never would have believed could be woven in to make math more accessible. At the beginning of my talk, I asked you about your relationship with math. So far, I've spoken to you about my approach to teaching math in my classroom. But the idea of play and making things personal to overcome challenges and obstacles can dovetail into your life as well. What do you find hard in your world? What do you avoid? What frightens you? And what might happen if you applied play, humor, or fun? Maybe those elements would help to lighten the load, remove stress, and offer you an opportunity for enjoyment and success. And now consider, what are the amorphous obstacles that you can surmount by making them more personal, more yours, by taking ownership? And perhaps those elements will help change your perception of what you are capable of what you can do and achieve. And, just like my math students, I think the answer may just surprise you. So, remember at the beginning of my talk, I said that there would be a test? Okay, here we go. If you add up all the numbers from 1 to 10, what would your answer be? I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it. Okay, time's up. Feel free to shout out your answers. If you remember the story of Gauss, we have 5 pairs of numbers, each totaling 11. And 5 times 11 neatly gives us our answer of 55. You all get an A+. Thank you.
Well, I certainly wish I had a teacher like Leonardo when I was coming up. I'll still work on that math problem after this. It's thinking outside of the box is what we're talking about, and making these moments with math something that we can all reimagine. And speaking of thinking outside of the box, our next speaker is going to help us reimagine ways to do that. Jason King has been using a framework called character-driven methodology to engage his students and foster a more radical learning environment for them. In addition to being a 20-year education veteran, Jason King is also a photographer, a drone pilot, and a real estate investor. He enjoys designing wild educational protocols, reading, writing, and learning the piano, including training to be in the Rocket League champ and spending quality time with his family. Please join me in welcoming our last speaker, Jason King.
I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've heard one question asked of me more times than I can count by my students, their parents, my colleagues, administrators, Bonnie Mwanda, the whole stakeholder continuum. What in the world are you doing? And usually, that question is precipitated by observing something I actually am doing in the classroom or in the hallway or meet the teacher night that by all standards of convention would be considered weird. For example, whenever I encounter a sleeping student or an auditorium full of tired dignitaries such as yourselves, I advocate that you stay awake by flapping your wings. Come on, flap. If you need to wake up, flap, flap. Don't be above it, flap. None of you has ever seen a sleeping bird fly. Now, if that sounds weird, that's okay, because it works. And therefore, I accept weird as a compliment. But I want you to remember something. It is better to be weird than forgotten. You see, weirdness has its own gravity for kids. It's open to wild interpretation and points them towards their imagination's horizon. It's risky and uncomfortable, but I find that my weirdness gives them permission to activate a state of healthy vulnerability that allows me to challenge them across multiple modalities. And it doesn't take long for my students to realize that they're going to explore ideas with me, that their mind's horizon really is the only limit in my classroom. One of my students, Caitlin C.B. Bailey, says, coming into Mr. King's room, you never knew what to expect, but you knew it was going to be enjoyable, unique, and engaging. Now, in order for me to let you understand what I do, I've got to first give you some insight into how my mind works. I am not, nor have I ever been, a linear thinker. I am an explorer, making connections across ideas and domains, roundabout and sideways sometimes. I am an unabashed lover of metaphor. My mind is a kaleidoscope, distilling new patterns and designs with each turn. This allows me to be solution-oriented, which empowers me to think creatively and divergently around the many problems I'm forced to face as an educator in the state of North Carolina. For example, this year our General Assembly passed Senate Bill 49, which says that if a student discloses a pronoun to me other than what is officially recorded, protocol is that I send that student immediately to a guidance counselor who will then receive explicit parental permission before that conversation can continue, full stop. And you all know that nothing builds rapport like a bureaucratic endeavor. Now, but hey, I'm a good sailor, and just like any other good English teacher, I simply set sail asking them for their prepositions. What are you above? What are you below? What are you with? What are you without? Now, don't tell anybody that. I don't want Senate Bill 50 to ban prepositions, okay? Now, I jest and bask in the shade of our duly elected officials' wisdom. But don't get me wrong. I understand that in education, there's plenty of need for linear thinking, systems, organizational patterns, and institutional fidelity. But outside of school, kids need to know how to think, to discern, to question, and to doubt the morass of information and noise currently saturating this age. And they deserve the full capacity of their minds if they're going to have to sort through this mess that we as their elders are leaving as our legacy on the earth, okay? Therefore, we must arm them with their creativity, their genius, their wisdom, and their unique perspective. So my creed as their teacher becomes to create a space where they can be both safe and vulnerable, empowered and powerful, as they literally feel their capacity grow beyond room 1524. And so if you walk into my room, you're going to see a story of many stories, all given voice and agency to becoming the authors of their own story into learning and growth. Tonight, I'd like to share a mere smattering of the many weird techniques and methods I use to help my students reimagine themselves as learners, but also the learning process. I'd like to show you how I create a space where my kids can reimagine themselves in the learning process, a space that my student Addison Ferris says it's okay to mess up and okay to be flawed, because that is how we grow as a person. Now, nothing I'm going to share with you this evening is revolutionary, okay? I'm not doing this to chase clout or to set trends. But what I will tell you is that as weird as some of my techniques may be, they are grounded in psychology and information theory, gleaned from a lifetime of studying and observing human behavior and taking risks to arc my students toward growth, toward capacity building. And that becomes the raison d'etre of my classroom. Not simply to be a cog in a larger machine, but a capacity building system in and of itself. That begins on the very first day when I leverage those initial interactions with my students as anchors to tether them to a vision that they can buy into and begin moving forward immediately. Out the gate, I impress upon my students a narrative, a story of what their experience in my classroom is going to be. And I cannot overstate the importance of this step. The science is very clear about the power of narrative as one of, if not the, most important vehicles of persuasion that there is. Not facts, not figures, not platitudes, not sound bites. If you want people to listen, empathize, buy in, and behave, you have to tell them a story that they want to believe, that they are willing or receptive to hearing. And the story I frame my classroom around is that of the archetypal hero's journey. And you all know that story, that of the diminutive individual becoming, of attaining one's potential against all odds. That's the heart of the American mythos. I mean, think about it. An underdog takes a risk and goes on a quest, and through sheer grit and determination, overcomes adversity to become, to attain success. Think Luke Skywalker, Katniss Everdeen, Beowulf, Frederick Douglass. This is all the same story, and it resonates across cultures and time, and especially among our young people today. And so I begin that shared story by telling them exactly where it's going to end. That every assignment, every task, every lesson is but one grueling step toward the summit of majestic Mount Capstone. That is the quest that will take them from lowly wise fool sophomores to collegiate-level operators, capable of questioning, understanding, evaluating, synthesizing, and transforming the world around them. Now, creating a culture like this is never a static process. It's always in motion, always dynamic. It's a frenetic, kinesthetic wave. I like to think of it kind of like playing a jazz piece, you know. It's a syncopated rhythm of constant renewal and reinforcement, adaptation and inflection, but nevertheless unified and deliberate in movement and in purpose. Now, I know that sounds a little abstract, and you may be concretely wondering what exactly a student may experience walking into this weird man's classroom. Well, I'd like to think a sensory smorgasbord. You see, I read Edward Bernays, and he said, visibility is the key to success. And so I manifest that aspect of his philosophy, both at the conscious and subconscious level. And so consciously, I may greet my students at the door with, squeal of the pig here, or this giant mosquito, or this here horse who currently serves as the Earl of Stool for a phone toilet, which has greater efficacy for confiscating devices from dopamine-addled teenagers than any phone jail you've ever heard of. But I digress. And so once they have crossed the threshold, they're then greeted by a buffet of educational propaganda posters curated from years of teaching Animal Farm that convey messages of encouragement or behavioral directives that I use to reinforce the culture of my class. Phrases such as, don't be sorry, be right. Or, I don't want your bad, I want your good. Or, boredom is the function of an inactive mind. Or, courage is what it takes to sit down and listen. Then there are numerous paintings and artistic renderings given to me by students who have survived the experience, internalized the narrative, and who understand that this truly is a growth class. Finally, there are a multitude of little eyes scattered throughout the room. Green lizards and never dead donkeys, Miyazaki Kadamas and do better rocks, get good seats, squawking ravens, purple dragons and sunshine butterflies and quacking geese that might attack on Fridays. Now, in time, all of these creatures integrate themselves into my students, into my lessons, or my students' experiences within my class. One of my former students, Olivia O.P. Paul, said, there were mornings I would walk in with 5 hours or less of sleep, and Mr. King would come in, coffee and horse in hand, and I could not have been more excited. You see, this here horse and I, have been teaching together for years. He is just as real in my class as I am. He has a voice. He speaks to my students. I'm the college board horse. I held that dictates, mandates, and frustrates. You see, I teach an AP seminar class created by College Board. And the problem I was having was that in the minds of my students and the emails of their parents, that monolithic educational institution and I were one and the same. And that is simply not the case. So I needed a way to disassociate from that entity. And the solution presented itself to me one day as I was sauntering about the North Carolina State Fairgrounds, smelling cooked corn and hot dogs. And I looked at a vendor's table, and this horse was looking at me. I said, how much? $1. And I said, sold, and made the single most cost-effective investment in my classroom ever. Because from that day forward, every single word I have ever read to my students that is curated by the AP College Board is read by that horse. And as weird as that was at first, and as weird as it still is today, it works. One of my students, Molly Dawson, says, the use of a stuffed horse facilitates communication in AP seminar and significantly alters the perspective of a rigorous course. The presence of the horse is a running joke, as it's the horse, not Mr. King, torturing us. As weird as it sounds, the horse increases the productivity of the students. End quote. You cannot argue with the horse's mouth. And that is to say nothing of the mosquito's proboscis. Okay? You see, a few years ago, I was teaching Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. And the idea of the Kafkaesque, which is to be trapped in an absurd system from which we cannot control or escape, is a little dense, okay? And they were having a little trouble understanding that. So I said, okay, let's pretend for a moment that this course, AP Capstone Seminar by College Board, has manifested itself in the form of a giant data-sucking mosquito. And every year, without fail, whenever they submit their official components to College Board for assessment, the mosquito appears and he hovers above their head and he gently whispers, give me your data. Give me your precious data, children. And as weird as that is, it works because the mosquito allowed my students to reimagine their experience in the rigorous course in relationship to that advanced literary concept, and they got it. Now, in all humility, I understand that on some days, my antics and characters in 1524 are trivial in comparison to what my students may be experiencing in life. And on those days, I need a more subtle way to remind them to keep their eyes on the prize of their own growth. And that's when I lean into that subconscious and I activate that panoply of posters I mentioned earlier through silence or even gesture. Now, speaking of gestures, I'd like you all to help me demonstrate the need for 3 of my posters, which serve as philosophical pillars in my classroom. I'm going to say 3 phrases to you. If you've heard a child say one of them, raise your hand. If you've heard a child say 2 of them, testify. And if you've heard all 3 phrases said by a child, can I get a Mwanda? All right? I don't know. I can't. I don't care. All right. Exactly. That's what I thought. In my 20 years of experience, I have found that most people who use these phrases are using them as excuses to disengage from the processes that are necessary to learning and growth. And that is antithetical to what I do. My goal is to activate your potential, to activate your capacity, not let you deactivate yourself. So it's incumbent upon me to challenge those excuses because the excuses you give yourself are the only excuse success needs to ignore you. So inevitably, when I hear, I don't know, I don't know is an excuse not to think. And thinking is exercise for your brain. And your brain is just like every other muscle in your body. If you exercise it, it gets stronger. It gains in mass. But if you don't exercise it, just like every other muscle in your body, it atrophies. It turns to jelly. And if you don't think as a young person, you may wake up as an adult with a jelly brain. And you don't want that. No. Then there's I can't. And I can't is an excuse not to act or do. And yes, you can. Yes, you can do everything I've asked you to do because Mr. King is not in the business of the impossible. But if you use I can't as an excuse to disengage, you deprive yourself of the experiences that over the course of your life will give you fulfillment and enrichment. And if you reach the end of that course and look back on your life, you will realize there is something you can do, and that is die. And you do not want that weight on your soul at the end of your journey. Last, there's I don't care. And I don't care is an excuse to avoid the truth. And the truth is, right now, you might not care about me, this horse, this classroom, tomorrow, none of it. But the truth also is that the person you are in the future cares very dearly about everything you do right now, because you are a ball of neuroplastic clay. And every choice you make, every decision you make, molds that clay into the adult that you will one day be. And if you are not conscious and deliberate about what you think and do, you might wake up one day a formless adult child. And you don't want that to be where your story goes. Now, taken together, my posters and my imaginary friends, they simply serve as creative solutions that allow me to be both thermometer and thermostat, to gauge the temperature of my students and to make adjustments in real time when they are too hot or too cold toward learning that day. Beyond that, they serve as voices of wisdom and humor, reminders in perpetuity of our mutual growth story, but also my prerogative to add mass to their minds and value to their lives. Bottom line, I am in the business of showing young people what they can do, that they can reimagine themselves as the single greatest agent in their lives, in their quest to seek purpose, identity, faith, and wisdom. That's the meaning of life. I want to show them that they can do what so many adults obviously cannot, and that's hold in the field of their intellect, their biases, and their cognitive dissonances, and mitigate those inhibitors with the awesome, magnanimous power of their minds. Now, in closing, I'd like to say that it doesn't matter whether you embrace talking horses or flapping or posters or phone toilets. If what you're doing is coming from a place of authenticity, of genuine human compassion, then you can make all the difference in a child's life, even when you don't know it. I learned this lesson from that sunshine butterfly that I mentioned earlier. You see, during COVID and remote learning, we were all in different places of pain and loneliness. And this horse and I would get up each day and turn on a Google Meet, and we would teach class to turn off cameras and static avatars, and in all honesty, I didn't even know if anybody was listening, okay? But unbeknownst to me, one of my students was bearing a burden. And this is a burden that if you knew, it would break your heart. And we could find the strongest person here tonight, and you would not want to bear that burden. But at the end of that year, that student wrote me a letter, and she told me her story. She shared her story with me. And she said that every day she would get up and turn on her camera, and that little ray of sunshine is what kept her here on earth in the darkest time of her life. And I cherish that sentiment more than any I have ever received. That is my treasure, because it answered the question of what in the world am I doing? And no amount of legislation, no war on education can ever take that from a teacher like me. And if me being weird helped that young person persevere, then it's all valid and it's all worth it, because the earth needs young people like that with real courage and real grit. That's what's going to save us. That's what's going to save our nation. Not the ironic righteous indignation of those who would whitewash history or ban books or criminalize librarians or demonize educators. I say we have to go in the opposite direction of all that noise. And we have to reimagine this younger generation as a wellspring of insight into how to live and conduct ourselves. And so I challenge you, stakeholders across the continuum, ask yourself, what in the world are you doing to grab the attention of this younger generation and push them toward their destiny, especially in these Kafkaesque times where a person of decency and sensibility cannot distinguish reality from satire, where the performative nonsense of jelly-brained adult children sets the tone and tenor of our adult discourse. Now, meeting this challenge is going to mean accepting an uncomfortable story, an inversion of the generational wisdom paradigm. This is going to be weird for you to accept, grown folks, but we have a lot to learn from the kids, from young people. They can teach us so much, especially in regard to information processing, and they deserve our full faith in their capacity. When they have that faith, they flourish and they shine a light into this darkness. And they offer us way more hope than the incessant noise currently stifling our zeitgeist like a blaring off-key trumpet. And as the horn blows, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. A vision with wings, as Coach Barry would say. We are in the fourth turning. And as the pages of history turn on us, I pray you will heed my revelation, heed my vision, that the children are the best solution we have. Are you weird enough to be worth remembering to those who will inherit the earth?
What a way to reimagine how we engage with each other. Jason, thank you. And thank you for bringing your authenticity to the stage. As we prepare to conclude the evening, we do want to welcome to the stage 3 outstanding educators from our community to remind us of our call to action while we walk out. Dr. Anise Williams, Wake County Public Schools' 2022-2023 Principal of the Year from Bug Elementary School, who, quote, loves God, loves people, and loves public education. In her pending retirement from public education, she looks forward to devoting more time to her love of others. Leslie Anderson, Wake County Public Schools' 2023-2024 Assistant Principal of the Year from Willow Springs High School. When Leslie isn't working or supervising after-school extracurriculars, she enjoys being a football and track mom and basketball wife. She loves family vacations and McDonald's cheeseburgers. Amen. All right. Terry Hennings, Wake County Public Schools' 2023-2024 Teacher of the Year from Garner Magnet High School. So this is going to get some controversy. Terry's dedicated to creating and celebrating NC State. He says, go Pack here. I'm supposed to say that. And then an avid supporter of Tennessee, go Vols. I'm not quite sure about that, but yeah. We are celebrating, though, because you create an inclusive and supportive learning environment in your classroom with the goal of producing productive citizens. Take it away.
Wow. What an incredible journey through our EdTalks tonight. We've experienced some amazing talks and some creative ideas about reimagining education. And as we come to the end of this event, we want to take a moment to reflect and share our final thoughts.
Reimagining education calls for us to embrace new possibilities. As educators, we need to step outside the box, come up with new ideas, and find ways to inspire our students as well as our community.
I couldn't agree with you more, Terry. It's essential to remember that every child and community is unique and has their own strengths and passions. We need to reimagine education to create personalized experiences that foster individual growth and development.
Absolutely, Leslie. And that reimagination can't stop at the classroom door. As Betsy so powerfully captured in her call to the community, we have to extend our ideas beyond the borders. We have to reimagine education on a larger scale and empower teachers and students and the community all around our district and all around our state to connect, to collaborate, and for us to learn from one another.
Well said, Dr. Williams. Reimagining education calls for us to explore diverse approaches. Bettina and Leonardo stressed this tonight by reimagining the 3 R's and by creating new ways to engage in mathematical learning. We have to encourage our students to be creative, curious, and critical thinkers in order for them to become lifelong learners.
And speaking of lifelong learning, it's crucial for us as educators to embrace the opportunity to reimagine our own roles. As Neil said, we need to work to create those memorable moments that will allow our students to feel a sense of relationship and belonging. Let's continually challenge ourselves to expand our knowledge, embrace the new technologies, and adapt to the changing needs of our students.
Precisely, Leslie. Reimagination starts with each one of us. We have to be willing to take risks and to do as Jason called us to be present. Together, we can reshape education, and we can transform the lives of countless students.
And to everyone in the room tonight, reimagining is not a solo endeavor. It is a team effort. It takes parents, teachers, and our community. We must embrace a culture of sharing and supporting in order to make sure our students become the very best versions of themselves.
Well said, Terry. Reimagining education is a grand adventure, and it's an honor to embark on this journey with all of you. So let's keep pushing boundaries, sparking innovation, and ultimately shaping a brighter future for generations to come.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our Principal of the Year, Assistant Principal of the Year, and Teacher of the Year. And I want to also welcome to the stage someone who helped make all of this possible. In order to help us close out the evening, I would like to invite to the stage Keith Poston, President of WakeEd Partnership.
Thank you so much. And I get to send you guys back home for some basketball. So, you know, I do want to thank the NCAA for scheduling UNC this afternoon, Go Hills, and NC State after this. So we got some stuff to watch. But mostly what I'm here on the stage tonight at the end is to thank some people. And the most important people I want to thank are these educators. Guys, these are our public schools. These are our public school teachers. And so I want to invite back on the stage Betsy, Bettina, Leonardo, Jason, and Neil. Please come on back on the stage. All right, let's give them a round of applause. Come on. All right, Micaiah, can you join them too? Our wonderful MC, Micaiah Thurman. Thank you for Micaiah. All right, now you guys hang out because I've got something for you. We've got some flowers for all of you to thank you for what you did, because honestly, this was about lifting up the educators, but I don't know about you, but I think they were the ones that were lifting us up tonight. But in addition to some flowers, we also have a little envelope in there with a check for each of you as a little thank you. These guys have worked so hard. They've worked so hard, and you can tell. Now, unlike them, I'm going to use my notes because I want to make sure that I don't forget anyone to thank before we leave out of here tonight. So just, if you guys want to, I'll tell you what, let's give them a round of applause, and you guys can step off the stage. But I do want to thank Meredith College for their hospitality and their great team. Thank you all in the back of the room. You guys are awesome. I want to thank my team, Doug Price, Caroline Graby, Shanika Simmons, and Jada Smith, who's not here. There's Shanika. They're the ones that had this dream and made this a reality, so I really want to point out them. our volunteer students from Wake Forest High, so thank you to them. Our sponsors, we couldn't put on events at WakeEd Partnership without them. Equitable Foundation, Paradox Consulting Partners, Town Bank, CW22, who's doing all the video for us, Milan Public Relations, that's Micaiah's company, so we love her, and Corey Arnold, who was our stage manager, who did that as a in-kind, so we appreciate that. We appreciate our Wake Education Partnership Board of Director members who are here. We have some elected officials that I can see down here front. We appreciate y'all being here. PTAs who promoted and supported the night, including the Wake PTA Council, our Wake County Public Schools leaders and teachers, and last but not least, the students from Middle Creek High School Career Academy of Professional Educators. Y'all, these are our future teachers that are here tonight. Look, we get a chance to work with teachers every day at WakeEd Partnership. I mean, it's always what we've been about. I mean, we were founded, first thing we ever did was put on a little talent show called Pieces of Gold to raise money for teacher grants. And we've been working with teachers for 40 years. So we're lucky that we get to see them every day. But we hope that you got a sense of what they do every day tonight. Unforgettable night. We appreciate them. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming out. And I hope we gave you something to think about and be inspired by these wonderful teachers. So thank you so much and have a great night.